Zhao Wei, a ruthless corporate executive, is murdered and transmigrates into the body of the villainous Grand Chancellor in a historical romance novel set in ancient China. Bound by a system that will explode his heart if he fails to romance the lethal female lead, Lady Lin, Wei must use his mastery of corporate strategy, contract law, and hostile takeovers to survive a treacherous imperial court. Faced with poison tea undead armies and a deranged emperor, Wei negotiates for his life and his heart. They say love is unpredictable, and today's story proves it. Welcome to Romance Crave Stories, where every episode is full of passion, secrets, and emotional twists. Let's begin. Death was not the end, it was merely an administrative error. Zhao Wei had been a high-powered corporate executive in the modern world, known for executing hostile takeovers with the precision of a guillotine. He was ruthless, efficient, and completely unbothered by sentimentality. His life had abruptly concluded when a disgruntled rival sabotaged his private elevator, sending him plummeting 70 floors. He expected nothingness. Instead, he awoke to the suffocating scent of burning incense and the blinding shimmer of scarlet silk. He was lying in an opulent bedchamber, surrounded by ornate carved mahogany and jade ornaments. As he sat up, a glowing blue screen materialized in the air, chiming with an irritatingly cheerful tone. System activated. Welcome, host. You have transmigrated into the historical romance novel, The Empress's Weeping Blade. You occupy the body of the Grand Chancellor, Zhao Wei, the tyrannical villain destined for execution in 3 months. Wei stared at the floating text. He rubbed his temples, feeling the unfamiliar weight of long, dark hair cascading over his shoulders. He was in ancient China. Worse, he was the antagonist in a melodramatic romance plot. System, Wei said, his voice surprisingly deep and resonant. What is my objective? To survive, hosts must achieve a 100% affection rating with the female lead, Lady Lin. Failure will result in immediate cardiac rupture. Current affection rating, -50%. Note, she is currently outside your door carrying poison wine. Wei let out a long, weary sigh. Romance was a poor investment, and sudden death was a terrible return on equity. He possessed no romantic skills, only an unparalleled mastery of leverage and negotiation. If this universe expected him to woo a homicidal heroine with poetry and longing glances, it was vastly underestimating his approach to problem-solving. He would treat this ridiculous scenario exactly like a failing corporate asset. He would audit the situation, restructure the relationship, and force a profitable outcome. The heavy wooden doors creaked open. A young woman stepped into the chamber, her eyes cast downward in feigned submissiveness. Lady Lin held a silver tray bearing an exquisite celadone wine cup. She was undeniably beautiful, but Wei could see the subtle tension in her jaw and the cold calculation hidden beneath her delicate facade. She approached the bed, kneeling gracefully. "My lord," she murmured, her voice like silk over steel. "I have brought you wine to soothe your humors." Wei looked at the poisoned cup, then at the assassin disguised as an innocent noblewoman. He adjusted his silken robes, preparing to litigate his survival. He took a breath. "Set it down," Wei commanded smoothly. "We have a negotiation to conduct." Lin's perfectly painted lips tightened into a thin line. She did not lower the tray. Instead, her grip shifted to reveal a gleaming silver dagger, raised to strike. Chapter 1. The cold silver of Lady Lin's dagger bit just deeply enough into Zhao Wei's throat to draw a single, dramatic drop of blood. In his past life, Wei had dealt with hostile takeovers, aggressive board members, and federal auditors. But none of them had ever possessed the sheer, terrifying grace of the woman currently leaning over him with a weapon. Assassination, Wei said, his voice meticulously steady, is a highly inefficient method of resolving a grievance. Have you considered the macroeconomic fallout of my sudden demise? Lin's eyes, dark and sharp as obsidian, narrowed. She pressed the blade a fraction closer. Your death will bring peace to the realm, tyrant. Do not try to confuse me with your madman's tongue. I know not what macroeconomics are, but I know the emperor will reward my clan handsomely for your head. Wei let out a long, measured breath, careful not to move his vocal cords too much. That is precisely your miscalculation. My death creates a power vacuum. The emperor is deeply paranoid. Once I am gone, he will immediately turn his executioners on the very clan that proved capable of murdering his Grand Chancellor. By killing me, you are liquidating your own assets. A blue translucent screen popped into existence right next to Lin's furious face, chiming with an inappropriately cheerful bell. System alert. High-risk negotiation. Lady Lin is highly suspicious. Affection rating, 55%. Suggestion. Tell her that her eyes are like twin moons. Wei mentally swiped the notification away. Flirting at knife point was a statistical death sentence. I offer an alternative, Wei continued, locking eyes with her. A mutually binding blood oath. A contract. I will use my political capital to shield your family from the Emperor's purges, and in exchange, you cease all attempts to forcefully terminate my life. Lin hesitated. The sheer absurdity of the tyrant Chancellor, a man historically known for boiling his enemies in oil, offering a polite, diplomatic treaty was enough to make her dagger waver. You would spare my family? Why? What game are you playing, Zhao Wei? I am restructuring my priorities, Wei said smoothly, tapping his fingers against the mattress as if sitting at a boardroom table. And currently my highest priority is not bleeding out on my own silk sheets. Do we have a deal, or must we explore other avenues of dispute resolution? She opened her mouth to demand what in the heavens dispute resolution meant, but the words never left her lips. The heavy rice paper window of the bedchamber didn't just open. It exploded inward in a violent shower of splintered bamboo and shredded parchment. 3 figures clad entirely in night-black garments vaulted into the room, curved sabers gleaming in the dim candlelight. They didn't even glance at Lin. Their eyes were locked entirely on Wei. Sever the head of the Chancellor, the lead assassin roared, lunging forward with terrifying speed. Lin instinctively scrambled off Wei, raising her tiny dagger, vastly outgunned and outmatched. Wei sat up, entirely unarmed, his heart hammering against his ribs as the lead assassin's saber descended in a deadly, silver arc aimed squarely at his neck. System alert. Imminent fatal damage detected. Commencing emergency gotcha spin. A massive, glowing roulette wheel materialized in midair, spinning wildly with a loud carnival tune as the lethal blade stopped mere inches from Wei's face. Chapter 2. The glowing roulette wheel in Wei's vision spun with agonizing slowness, playing a jaunty, celestial melody that completely ruined the tension of his impending decapitation. With a flash of golden light, a heavy, solid gold abacus materialized in Wei's empty hands. The lead assassin's saber crashed down, violently colliding with the thick brass counting beads. The impact sent a shockwave through Wei's arms, but the golden frame held strong, entirely unblemished. The assassin blinked behind his mask, utterly baffled. Who parried a lethal strike with a merchant's accounting tool? Wei did not waste the opening. Aggressive restructuring, he grunted, twisting his wrists and driving the heavy, solid gold edge of the abacus directly upward into the assassin's jaw. There was a sickening crunch, and the man flew backward, crashing through a lacquered folding screen. Lady Lin did not stand idle. Recognizing a temporary alignment of their interests, she moved like a striking viper. She ducked beneath the second assassin's swing, her silver dagger slicing cleanly through his wrist, disabling his sword arm. Seeing his comrades fall, the third assassin cursed, reaching into his robes and slamming a sphere onto the floor. Thick, pungent gray smoke erupted, blinding them both. Wei coughed, waving the heavy abacus defensively. When the smoke finally cleared, the remaining assassins had vanished into the night, leaving only their unconscious leader groaning in the ruins of the folding screen. Lin lowered her dagger, her chest heaving as she stared at the Chancellor in complete disbelief. You deflected a forged steel blade, with an abacus? It is surprisingly heavy, Wei noted, adjusting his disheveled silk robes and dusting off the golden beads, and highly effective at auditing physical vulnerabilities. Before Lin could demand answers about the glowing light or the sudden appearance of the gold, the heavy wooden doors of the bedchamber were violently kicked open. Dozens of heavily armored Imperial guards poured into the room, their halberds lowered and gleaming with deadly intent. Behind them scurried a high-ranking palace eunuch, his face pale and slick with sweat. He fell to his knees, pressing his forehead so hard against the floorboards that it bruised. Grand Chancellor, the eunuch squeaked, his voice trembling with sheer terror. The Son of Heaven commands your immediate presence in the throne room. The eunuch slowly raised his head, his panicked eyes darting from the unconscious assassin to Lady Lin. And His Majesty commands that you bring the head of the treacherous woman who stands beside you. The guards took a synchronized, threatening step forward. Wei gripped his golden abacus, mentally calculating his rapidly depreciating odds of survival. Chapter 3. The heavily armored guards gripped their halberds, their eyes darting between the terrifying Grand Chancellor and the solitary woman standing behind him. Lady Lin's grip tightened on her silver dagger, her muscles coiling like a spring. She was ready to fight to the death. Zhao Wei, however, was not about to let his only ticket to survival get liquidated. He stepped smoothly in front of her, raising the golden abacus like a badge of office. Her head, Wei announced, his voice dripping with absolute, authoritative ice, remains firmly attached to her shoulders. Stand down. The eunuch let out a strangled gasp, his face pressing so hard into the floorboards Wei feared the man might fuse with the wood. Be but Chancellor. The Son of Heaven's mandate is absolute. To defy it is treason. To blindly execute a key witness before extracting actionable intelligence is a gross mismanagement of imperial resources, Wei countered, staring down the guards with the tyrant's legendary glare. Lady Lin is currently under my exclusive jurisdiction. If any of you attempt an unauthorized seizure of my prisoner, I will personally see to it that your entire lineages are demoted to the lowest caste. Are we clear? The guards visibly paled. The Chancellor's historical ruthlessness was well documented. They slowly lowered their halberds, stepping back in unison. System alert. Lady Lin is deeply confused by your refusal to murder her. Affection rating, 45%. Slowly climbing out of the red. Keep up the good work, host. Lin stared at his broad back, entirely bewildered by his bizarre vocabulary and sudden mercy. Why are you protecting me? She whispered harshly. I protect my investments, Wei replied without looking back, slipping into the cold pragmatism that had made him a boardroom legend. Keep your blade hidden, follow my lead, and try not to antagonize the chief executive. The what? The Emperor, Wei sighed. Come. The march to the imperial throne room felt like a walk to a final disciplinary hearing, albeit one with significantly more dragon motifs and gold leaf. Massive vermilion doors groaned open, revealing a cavernous hall illuminated by hundreds of flickering oil lanterns. At the far end of the hall, lounging upon the elevated dragon throne, was the young emperor. He did not look like a dignified ruler. He looked like a bored, deeply unpredictable predator. In his lap rested a heavy, intricately carved repeating crossbow, loaded with steel-tipped quarrels. Ah, my beloved Chancellor, the emperor's voice echoed, high-pitched and thoroughly unhinged. His dark, manic eyes flicked to the woman standing at Wei's side. You brought the little traitor, but I specifically recall requesting her head in a box, not attached to her neck. Your Majesty, Wei began, bowing exactly as his inherited muscle memory dictated, preparing a flawless verbal defense. I bring her alive because... Boring, the emperor sang out. With a delighted giggle, the young ruler abruptly raised the heavy repeating crossbow, leveled it directly at Lady Lin's chest, and pulled the trigger. Chapter 4. The steel quarrel tore through the air with a deadly, shrieking whistle. Wei didn't have time to run a cost-benefit analysis, he simply reacted. He stepped squarely in front of Lady Lin, and swung the abacus of inevitable audits in a desperate, two-handed arc. Clang! The heavy steel bolt struck a solid gold bead, snapping in half and spinning harmlessly away to clatter against the polished marble floor. The reverberating impact stung Wei's palms, but he forced his posture to remain as rigid and unreadable as a blank ledger. Behind him, Lin let out a soft, sharp breath. She had been fully prepared to dodge, but the Chancellor, the ruthless tyrant who had historically destroyed anyone in his path, had just placed his own body between her and a lethal projectile. A whimsical, melodic chime tinkled in the air. A floating translucent screen, framed in a soothing pastel pink and sage green border, materialized directly in Wei's line of sight. System alert. Physical protection protocol successful. Lady Lin is experiencing severe cognitive dissonance. Affection rating, 30%. Keep up the gallant behavior, host. Wei mentally dismissed the cozy, cream-colored text box. He kept his eyes locked on the emperor. The young monarch slowly lowered the crossbow. The manic delight vanished from his face, replaced by a cold, hollow stillness that was infinitely more terrifying. You parried my shot, the emperor whispered, the heavy silence in the vast throne room amplifying his voice. You, my loyal servant, raised a weapon to defy your emperor's direct decree? I protected a vital asset, your majesty, Wei countered, bowing low to mask his racing pulse. A dead assassin yields no intelligence. If we execute her now, we lose the network that funded her strike. We must thoroughly audit her contacts, trace the flow of illicit silver, and expose the rot within your court. It is simply risk mitigation. The emperor stared at him for a long, agonizing moment. Then a slow, terrifying smile spread across his pale face. Risk mitigation, the emperor repeated, tasting the unfamiliar syllables. How profoundly boring. I do not care for audits, Chancellor. I care for a spectacle. The emperor reached out and gripped a golden, dragon-shaped lever attached to the armrest of his throne. Let us see, the emperor giggled, his dark eyes wide and unhinged. How well your heavy golden toy mitigates the Imperial basement. He yanked the lever backward. The marble floor beneath Wei and Lin didn't just open, it vanished. With a sickening lurch of gravity, the solid ground gave way to a gaping black abyss. As they plummeted into the darkness, a deafening, blood-curdling roar echoed from the depths below them, rattling the very bones in Wei's chest. Chapter 5. The fall was terrifyingly brief. Instead of plunging into a lethal abyss, Wei and Lin hit a steep, perfectly polished stone chute that sent them spiraling into the crushing darkness. They slid at breakneck speeds before being unceremoniously dumped onto a floor of damp, compacted sand. Wei groaned, pushing himself up and brushing the dirt from his ruined silk robes. The abacus of inevitable audits had bruised his ribs during the slide, but he held onto it tightly. A soft, melodic chime cut through the darkness. A translucent system screen, elegantly framed in a soothing pastel pink and sage green border, with cream-colored typography, floated into view. System alert. Welcome to the Imperial Beast Pit. Hostile entity detected. Suggestion. Hold Lady Lin's hand to calm her racing heart. Affection bonus, +5%. System, Wei muttered under his breath. Your situational awareness is staggeringly incompetent. He swiped the delicate pink screen away just as eerie, green phosphorus torches flared to life along the curved stone walls. They were in a subterranean coliseum, the walls deeply gouged by massive claws. Stay behind me, Lin whispered fiercely. She had already recovered her footing, her silver dagger raised, eyes scanning the shadows. Do not speak. It hunts by sound. Before Wei could ask what it was, the shadows at the far end of the arena shifted. A pair of glowing, sulfur-yellow eyes opened in the dark, floating easily 10 feet off the ground. With a deafening hiss that vibrated in Wei's teeth, the beast stepped into the green light. It was a monstrous, scaled serpent the size of a trade galley, its thick body covered in heavy obsidian plating. Venom dripped from its fangs, sizzling as it hit the sand. A black-scaled WYRM. Lin breathed, her voice trembling for the very first time. The Emperor feeds his political prisoners to it. We cannot pierce that armor. Wei adjusted his stance, gripping his golden abacus. Every impenetrable corporate structure has a weak point, he said, his eyes tracing the WYRM's massive, shifting form. If it's armored on the top, its soft underbelly is likely exposed during offensive maneuvers. I will draw its attention. When it rears up, you strike. Lin stared at him aghast. You are a scholar. A politician. You will be swallowed whole. I am the Grand Chancellor, Wei corrected coldly. I do not get swallowed. I orchestrate hostile takeovers. Wei sprinted forward, yelling out a string of highly complicated tax evasion laws to draw the beast's attention. The WYRM roared, a sound like grinding boulders, and lunged at him with terrifying speed. It reared back, opening its massive jaws to snap Wei in half, exposing the pale, unarmored scales of its throat. Now, Wei shouted. Lin vaulted off the stone wall, flying through the air like a dart, her silver blade aimed perfectly at the WYRM's exposed neck. But as she struck, the beast violently thrashed, slamming its heavy tail into the cavern wall. The structural impact was devastating. The ceiling groaned, and a massive, jagged stalactite broke free from the cavern roof, hurtling directly toward Lin as she hung suspended in midair. Chapter 6. Time seemed to dilate as the massive, jagged stalactite plummeted toward Lady Lin. Wei did not hesitate. Relying entirely on the absurd heft of his SSR tier item, he planted his feet, spun on his heel, and hurled the abacus of inevitable audits into the air like a solid gold discus. The heavy accounting tool slammed into the falling stone spike with the force of a cannonball. The stalactite exploded into a shower of harmless gravel and dust. The abacus rebounded off the cavern wall, clattering to the sandy floor yards away. Free from the falling debris, Lin's momentum carried her forward. Her silver dagger buried itself deep into the WYRM's soft, pale throat. The beast let out a deafening, gurgling shriek. It thrashed violently, the sheer force of its spasms throwing Lin backward through the air. Wei scrambled forward, sliding to his knees in the dirt, and caught her. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs, but he managed to cradle her securely against his chest, their bodies tumbling into a heap against the Colosseum wall. A minimalist, cream-colored screen with clean sage green typography and a soft pink border materialized above them, chiming with a gentle, acoustic melody. System alert. Dramatic rescue and physical contact achieved. Lady Lin's heart is fluttering. Affection rating, 15%. Suggestion. Gaze deeply into her eyes and declare your eternal devotion. Wei ignored the aesthetically pleasing prompt. He looked down at Lin, who was staring up at him with wide, completely bewildered eyes. You threw away your only weapon, she breathed, her voice laced with disbelief. For me? A woman who tried to slit your throat an hour ago. Gold can be mined and reminted, Wei said, wincing as he pushed himself up into a protective stance over her. Human capital is irreplaceable. If I lose you, my entire organizational structure collapses. Lin blinked. The Chancellor's words were absolute nonsense. Yet the fierce, unwavering conviction in his dark eyes made her chest tighten inexplicably. No man in the imperial court had ever looked at her as something of value beyond a political pawn, or a pretty ornament. Chancellor. She started, a faint flush creeping up her neck. Hold that thought, Wei interrupted, his corporate stoicism returning in full force. Our primary obstacle is not yet liquidated. The black-scaled WIRM had not fallen. It ripped the tiny silver dagger from its neck with a swipe of its claw. The wound was deep, but it wasn't fatal. Instead of bleeding crimson, the gash glowed a toxic, bubbling neon green. The beast turned its massive head toward them. Its sulfur-yellow eyes were filled with pure, ancient malice. Its throat began to distend and swell, emitting a horrific hissing sound like a boiling cauldron. It's preparing a venom breath, Lin gasped, scrambling to her feet. It will melt the very stone. We have to run. There is nowhere to run, Wei calculated, his eyes scanning the enclosed circular walls of the pit. The splash radius will cover the entire floor. The WIRM opened its jaws, and a blindingly bright torrent of highly corrosive, boiling green acid erupted toward them like a tidal wave. Chapter 7. The wave of boiling green acid roared toward them, an inescapable tsunami of melting death. System. Wei bellowed, his corporate survival instincts taking complete control. Open the end-user license agreement. Maximize window. Font size 2000. A colossal, translucent wall of cream-colored light, elegantly bordered in pastel pink and sage green, violently expanded into existence right in front of them. Millions of glowing, microscopic characters of impenetrable legal jargon formed a solid, luminous barrier from floor to ceiling. The tidal wave of venom crashed against the system's interface. Hiss. Lady Lin squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the searing agony. Instead, she felt Wei's heavy silk robes enveloping her, his arms firmly locked around her shoulders, shielding her from the intense heat. She opened her eyes to see the deadly acid washing harmlessly off the giant, glowing wall of text. What celestial magic is this? Lin gasped, staring at the endless, scrolling paragraphs of the EULA. Are those ancient sutras of protection? It is a firewall, Wei grunted, planting his boots into the dirt as the sheer kinetic force of the acid pushed the text box backward. A legally binding shield of impenetrable nonsense. Not even a mythical beast can eat through this much fine print. System alert. Exploit detected. The terms of service are not intended for defensive combat. Deducting 500 karma points. Bill it to my estate, Wei muttered. The torrent of acid finally sputtered and ceased. The black-scaled WIRM stood panting, its massive chest heaving as it completely exhausted its venom reserves. It was lethargic, overheated, and entirely vulnerable. The asset is severely depreciated, Wei noted, dropping his arms from Lin and stepping out from behind the fading text box. Now is the time to liquidate. But without my abacus, we lack a blunt instrument. Lin looked at him, her dark eyes flashing with a sudden, fiery resolve. We don't need a blunt instrument, Chancellor. I have my chi. Before Wei could run a risk assessment, Lin leaped forward. She gathered a swirling, visible vortex of wind and inner energy into her delicate palms, aimed at the pile of heavy stone debris Wei had created when he shattered the falling stalactite. With a fierce shout, she thrust her hands forward. A shockwave of pure force slammed into the rubble, launching a massive, jagged boulder through the air like a cannonball. It flew straight into the WIRM's open, gasping mouth. The beast choked, its sulfur-yellow eyes rolling back in its head. It let out a final, pathetic gurgle, crashed onto the sandy floor, and stopped moving entirely. Silence descended on the pit, broken only by the sizzling of the remaining acid. Wei adjusted his cuffs. An incredibly efficient hostile takeover. Lin turned to him, her chest rising and falling. A genuine, breathtakingly beautiful smile broke across her usually stoic face. It was the first time he had seen her look truly happy. We survived, she breathed. But the celebration was a grave miscalculation. The acid that had deflected off Wei's system screen had pooled heavily around the edges of the arena, rapidly dissolving the ancient foundation of the pit. A deafening crack echoed through the chamber. The ground beneath their feet didn't just crumble. The entire structural integrity of the floor failed simultaneously. Lin screamed as the stone gave way completely, sending them plummeting into a pitch-black chasm, directly toward the roaring roar of an underground river of rushing, silver mercury. Chapter 8. The rushing wind tore through Wei's hair as he and Lady Lin plummeted toward the subterranean river. Below them, the churning rapids weren't water. They were pure liquid mercury, glowing with a deadly, silver luminescence. Toxic assets, Wei yelled over the rushing wind. Highly unregulated toxic assets. Lin squeezed her eyes shut, preparing to be assimilated into the poisonous silver current. System. Wei roared, rapidly swiping at the empty air. I am authorizing an emergency expenditure. Liquidate 500 points and deploy a flotation device. A delicate chime resonated through the cavern. A minimalist, cream-colored screen with a soothing pastel pink border and clean, sage green typography popped into existence. System alert. Emergency requisition approved. Deploying cozy flotation vessel to prevent hostile liquidation of host. A burst of soft, rosy light engulfed the darkness just beneath them. Instead of a wooden raft or a sturdy imperial barge, a massive, obscenely plush, pastel pink lotus flower materialized mid-air. Its petals were made of something resembling heavily reinforced marshmallows. They crashed into the center of the giant flower with a muffled thump. The plush lotus hit the surface of the silver river, bobbing gently on the lethal mercury currents, completely impervious to the toxic metal. Lin opened her eyes, gasping for breath as she sank slightly into the incredibly soft, cream-colored center of the flower. She patted the spongy petals, utterly bewildered. Is this a divine artifact of the goddess of mercy? It is an emergency corporate lifeboat, Wei replied, aggressively straightening his disheveled collar as he sat up. And I intend to deduct its cost from the Emperor's estate. Please remain seated and keep your arms inside the vessel. The current is volatile. System alert. Lady Lin feels incredibly secure in your ridiculously soft boat. Affection rating, 5%. So close to breaking even. The pink lotus drifted down the glowing silver river, carrying them deeper into the forgotten catacombs. For a brief, peaceful moment, the only sound was the gentle lapping of the deadly mercury against the plush petals. Then the river stopped flowing. Wei frowned, leaning over the edge of the lotus. The heavy silver liquid wasn't just stalling. It was reversing its flow, defying gravity entirely. The mercury violently surged upward, pulling from the riverbed to form a colossal, towering, faceless humanoid figure made entirely of liquid metal. It loomed over their tiny pink boat, slowly raising a massive, shimmering silver fist to crush them into the toxic depths. Chapter 9. The colossal fist of liquid silver descended, threatening to permanently liquidate them and their aggressively plush pink lifeboat. System. Wei barked over the roaring rush of the toxic metal. Initiate an immediate, comprehensive asset freeze. I am authorizing the liquidation of all remaining points. A delicate chime, like wind chimes in a spring breeze, echoed through the cavern. A minimalist, cream-colored system screen bordered in pastel pink materialized, its clean, sage-green typography glowing softly in the dark. System alert. Transaction approved. Deploying absolute zero audit orb. Stay cozy host. A beautifully crafted, frosted glass orb dropped directly into Wei's palm. It radiated a cold so intense that frost immediately crystallized on his silk sleeves. He didn't hesitate. Treating the deadly artifact like a bad quarterly report, Wei hurled the orb directly into the center of the towering mercury golem's chest. Lady Lin, Wei shouted. Prepare to shatter the holding company. The orb detonated with a muted, elegant ping. A shockwave of absolute zero blasted outward. In less than a second, the towering golem of rushing liquid silver turned into a magnificent, completely immobilized statue of solid, frozen metal. Lin did not need further instruction. She leaped from the marshmallow soft petals of their boat, her wind chi swirling around her legs. She delivered a devastating, spinning heel kick directly to the golem's frozen knee joint. The structural integrity of the frozen asset catastrophically failed. With a deafening crack, the massive golem shattered into a million harmless, glittering silver ice cubes that rained down like diamonds into the dried riverbed. Their plush lotus boat skidded safely onto the solid stone shore of a massive, illuminated underground vault. Wei stepped off the boat, brushing the silver dust from his shoulders. An aggressive restructuring but highly effective. System alert. Lady Lin is deeply impressed by your flawless synergy. Affection rating, 5%. Congratulations. You are no longer in the red. You are officially in the awkward colleague zone. Lin landed gracefully beside him, panting softly. She looked around the cavernous vault, which was piled high with unimaginable treasures, crates of imperial jade, chests of gold bullion, and racks of legendary weaponry. But her eyes widened as they landed on the far end of the room. Chancellor, she whispered, her voice tightening with dread. Wei followed her gaze. Sitting casually atop a mountain of gold ingots was the Emperor. He was sipping from a jade teacup, completely unharmed, flanked by heavily armored imperial elites. Behind him sat a gilded, perfectly functioning mechanical elevator cage. Did you honestly believe, the Emperor giggled, his manic eyes flashing in the torchlight, that I would build a trapdoor without installing a private executive lift to my own vault? He snapped his fingers. The imperial elites parted, dragging forward a bound and gagged prisoner. Lin let out a choked gasp. The Emperor smiled lazily and drew a jagged, serrated blade, pressing it directly against the neck of Lady Lin's beloved mother. Chapter 10. Mother. Lady Lin's voice shattered the vast silence of the subterranean vault. She took a desperate, reckless step forward, her silver dagger trembling in her usually steady grip. The Emperor lazily raised a hand, his jagged blade pressing a fraction closer to the older woman's throat. One more step, little traitor, and I forcefully retire her. He took a languid sip from a transparent crystal cup in his free hand. It held a peculiar, meticulously layered beverage, a vibrant, bright green base beneath a thick, pristine white foam top. Fascinating brew this, the Emperor mused, swirling the bright green liquid beneath the white cloud of foam. A foreign delicacy from the Eastern Islands. Though I find the aesthetics a bit bold for an execution. Wei rapidly analyzed the hostage. This was Lady Lin's mother, the matriarch of her family. From what Wei could deduce of their dynamic, Lin consulted her mother regarding all financial and personal matters. The older woman wasn't just a beloved parent. She was the shadow chief financial officer of the entire Lin clan's estate. Losing her would permanently bankrupt Lin's emotional and economic stability. It was an unacceptable loss of capital. Your Majesty, Wei projected his voice, stepping slightly in front of Lin and adopting his most authoritative boardroom posture. This is a gross misallocation of leverage. Executing the Lin clan's primary financial advisor will tank the provincial tax yields. It is simply bad business. The Emperor laughed, a high, echoing sound that bounced off the towering mountains of gold bullion. I do not care about tax yields, Chancellor. You have derailed my entire imperial narrative. A minimalist cream-colored screen with clean, sage-green typography and a pastel pink border popped up in Wei's peripheral vision. System alert. The Emperor's sanity is rapidly depreciating. Suggestion. De-escalate with a heartfelt apology. Wei mentally dismissed the aggressively soft aesthetic text box. I propose a trade, Wei offered smoothly, holding his empty hands open to show he was unarmed. Me for the parent company. You despise me. I am the anomaly in your court. Let the women go, and I surrender myself to your custody without resistance. Lin grabbed his silk sleeve, her eyes wide with sheer horror. No. Zhao Wei, you cannot. He will torture you. The Emperor's manic smile slowly vanished. He lowered his layered green tea, his eyes narrowing into dark, hateful slits. He looked from Wei's stoic face to Lin's desperate grip on his arm. You think you can negotiate with the Son of Heaven in his own domain? The Emperor whispered, his voice dripping with venom. You think you can buy her life with yours? I do not want a trade, Chancellor. I want a total liquidation. With a swift, brutal motion, the Emperor kicked Lady Lin's mother backward. Lin screamed a blood-curdling cry as her mother tumbled over the edge of the gold mountain, plummeting directly toward the grinding, razor-sharp steel gears of the vault's massive, active incinerator vent below. Chapter 11. Lady Lin's mother plummeted toward the grinding, razor-sharp steel gears of the incinerator vent, her silk robes billowing in the updraft. Wei's corporate mind instantly switched from fiscal policy to advanced geometric physics. The margin for error was non-existent. System. Wei roared, rapidly analyzing the distance and velocity. Map the operational area. Project the falling asset's trajectory onto a complete inner product space. A delicate chime rang out. A minimalist cream-colored screen with clean, sage-green typography snapped into existence. Instantly, a three-dimensional grid, glowing in soft pastel pink, overlaid the entire subterranean vault. System alert. Calculating trajectory within a Hilbert space model. Optimal interception vector mapped at complex variable z equals x plus I. A glowing pink target materialized in midair, hovering precariously between the falling matriarch and the lethal gears below. Lady Lin, Wei shouted, pointing directly at the glowing coordinates. Target the apex of that vector. Apply maximum wind shear. Lin didn't question his bizarre terminology or the glowing mathematical grid. Relying entirely on her Chancellor's strategic guidance, she thrust her palms forward, releasing a massive, concentrated vortex of compressed wind qi. The invisible blast slammed into the exact coordinate just as her mother passed through it. The kinetic force violently redirected the older woman's trajectory, throwing her clear over the incinerator and onto a massive, relatively soft pile of ancient silk tapestries. The residual wind blast continued downward, striking the primary cog of the incinerator with a deafening screech of rending metal. The massive steel gears jammed, sparking violently before grinding to a permanent, smoking halt. Lin collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. Her mother sat up in the pile of silk. She took a moment to calmly brush the ash from her impeccably tailored robes and adjust her heavy jade hairpins. Then her sharp, calculating eyes locked directly onto Zhao Wei. She looked the Chancellor up and down with the ruthless, assessing gaze of a veteran auditor reviewing a quarterly report. "Is this the one, Lin?" the matriarch demanded, her voice echoing imperiously off the vault walls. "He has broad shoulders, excellent reflexes, and he clearly understands asset protection. Acceptable. I expect exactly 11 grandchildren to inherit and diversify our estate. See that you do not dally." Lin's face flushed a deep, violent crimson, completely ruining her stoic assassin persona. "Mother, we are in the middle of a hostile execution." High above them, sitting upon the mountain of gold bullion, the Emperor's jade teacup shattered in his grip. The matcha cloud latte spilled over his knuckles, the pristine white foam mixing with the bright green tea. His manic laughter had completely evaporated, replaced by a twitching, unhinged fury. "You ruin my traps," the Emperor hissed, his voice echoing unnaturally in the cavernous room. "You defile my narrative with your rules and your treaties. If you love my wealth so much, Chancellor, you can drown in it." He slammed his hand onto a large, crimson dragon seal embedded in the stone wall behind him. The massive iron doors of the vault slammed shut with a boom that rattled Wei's teeth, sealing them inside. A low, terrifying rumble began to shake the floor. The mountains of solid gold bullion surrounding them began to glow fiercely red-hot, instantly melting into a rising, boiling tsunami of liquid wealth pouring directly toward them. Chapter 12. The boiling tsunami of liquid wealth roared toward them, radiating a heat so intense it instantly singed the edges of Wei's silk robes. "We are experiencing a highly aggressive liquidation," Lin's mother noted with frightening composure, not moving an inch from her pile of silk tapestries. "System," Wei commanded, rapidly swiping his hands through the air as if organizing a highly complex video editing timeline. "Initialize a 3D workspace. I need a multi-node structural barrier. Link it to a camera projection to map the cavern's exact geometry." A melodic chime rang out, completely at odds with their impending doom. The familiar minimalist screen with its soft pink and sage green borders popped into existence. "System alert. Rendering 3D spatial nodes. Deploying whimsical thermal mesh. Utilizing Ye-grade magical resistance." From the glowing system interface, massive thick cables of pastel pink and cream-colored energy shot outward. Moving at blinding speed, the glowing threads began to intertwine, looping and knotting themselves into a colossal, mathematically perfect crochet pattern. Within seconds, it formed a massive, highly durable thermal net, resembling an impossibly large, inverted bucket hat, spanning the entire width of the vault. The boiling wave of liquid gold slammed into the soft, whimsical mesh. Instead of incinerating the net, the thermal-resistant threads absorbed the extreme heat. As the molten gold pressed through the tight, magically reinforced stitches, it was rapidly cooled and extruded on the other side as harmless, solid, glittering skeins of pure gold yarn. Lin stared in absolute wonder as the deadly tsunami was neatly repackaged into hundreds of manageable, aesthetically pleasing golden coils that clattered safely to the stone floor. "An excellent packaging strategy," the matriarch noted, picking up a skein of the solid gold yarn and inspecting it with a critical eye. "Cost-effective, highly durable, and visually appealing. His branding is impeccable, Lin. You have chosen well." Lin buried her face in her hands. "Mother, please. He is a tyrant, not a merchant." "I am a man who appreciates high-quality production value," Wei corrected, adjusting his cuffs. He looked up at the Emperor, whose jaw was practically unhinged with shock. The Emperor shrieked, a sound of absolute, unadulterated fury. His ultimate trap had just been reduced to a cozy arts and crafts project. You defy the heavens. You defy the author, the Emperor screamed. His voice began to distort, dropping into a terrifying, unnatural octave that rattled the cavern walls. He reached deep into his imperial robes and pulled out a jagged, pulsating black scroll. It didn't look like an object of this world. It seemed to consume the very torchlight around it, radiating a terrifying, corrupted energy. If I cannot liquidate your assets within the confines of this world, the Emperor hissed, his eyes turning entirely pitch black, I will simply format the entire server. He ripped the dark scroll open. Instantly, the solid stone walls of the vault stopped being stone, dissolving right before their eyes into a chaotic blizzard of raw, bleeding, red code. Chapter 13. The bleeding red code ripped through the vault, devouring the solid stone walls and the intricate crochet net of golden yarn. Where the red text touched, reality simply ceased to exist, leaving only a terrifying, empty void. He is executing a hard reset. Wei yelled over the digital roaring. System. Partition the drive and quarantine the corrupted files. A frantic, discordant chime buzzed. The system screen flickered wildly, its soothing pastel borders glitching into harsh, jagged static. Fatal error. Admin override detected. Complete server deletion in 45 seconds. Goodbye, host. Wei looked down. His left hand was already beginning to pixelate, dissolving into a stream of floating red zeros and ones. Lin gasped, her dagger clattering to the floor. Zhao Wei, your hand. What is happening to you? It appears my temporary contract in this vessel is expiring, Wei said, his voice remarkably steady despite the fact that his left forearm had just vanished. Unacceptable. Lin's mother barked. The red code was sweeping toward her pile of silk tapestries. I did not authorize this liquidation. Fix this, Chancellor, or I will haunt your balance sheets for eternity. Wei acted instantly. System. Compress the Lin matriarch into a secure, encrypted zip file and upload her to a quarantine pastel pink cloud server. With a soft bloop, Lady Lin's mother was instantly minimized into a perfectly organized, cream-colored digital folder adorned with a tiny sage green ribbon. The folder floated safely upward, out of the red code's reach. The Emperor shrieked with manic laughter from his crumbling throne of code. You cannot save yourselves. I am erasing the database. You will be nothing. Wei turned to Lin. Her beautiful face was streaked with ash and tears, her stoic assassin facade entirely shattered. Lady Lin, Wei said, stepping closer as his right leg began to pixelate. The only way to override an admin wipe is to establish co-ownership of the root directory. I need you to sign a permanent, legally binding merger. A what? Lin cried, grabbing his solid shoulder to keep him from falling. A lifetime partnership agreement, Wei clarified, his dark eyes softening in a way that made her chest ache. Marry me, Lin. Lin didn't hesitate. She didn't ask about the logistics of marrying a man who was 50% deleted. She simply grabbed the lapels of his silk robes, pulled him down and crashed her lips against his. It was a kiss that defied physics, code and corporate law. A massive, golden bell tolled through the void. Ing. Affection rating, 100%. Cardiac rupture cancelled. Ultimate objective achieved. System alert. Spousal override activated. You now hold 51% of the majority shares in the Heavenly Court server. Root access granted. Wei pulled back, breathless, a triumphant smirk returning to his face. We have a controlling interest. He snapped his remaining fingers. A massive, glowing trash bin icon materialized directly above the Emperor. The tyrant screamed as he was unceremoniously dragged into the bin, which immediately emptied itself with a satisfying, crinkling sound. The red code stopped expanding. System alert. Main story complete. Commencing co-op transmigration to the real-world origin server. Please hold hands tightly during transfer. The world began to dissolve into a blinding, pristine white light. Wei gripped Lin's hand, feeling the solid, comforting warmth of her fingers interlaced with his. They had won. The hostile takeover was complete. But just as the blinding light entirely consumed his vision, a harsh, jagged red error screen violently slashed across Wei's vision. Critical error. Partner data fragmented during transfer. Packet loss at 99%. Rerouting. Lin's hand suddenly vanished from his grip. Lin, Wei roared, thrashing blindly in the infinite white void. System. Halt the transfer. Where is she? There was no answer. Only the chilling silence of the digital void, and the terrifying realization that he was returning to the modern world entirely alone. Epilogue. Zhao Wei awoke to the sterile hum of central air conditioning and the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. He was slumped over his massive mahogany desk in his penthouse office, overlooking the sprawling, neon-lit skyline of the modern world. He sat upright, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was back in his tailored Armani suit. The silk robes, the ancient catacombs, the system, all of it was gone. "Lin," he gasped, stumbling out of his leather chair. Silence greeted him. The penthouse was empty. For 6 grueling months, Wei utilized every resource at his disposal. He abandoned hostile takeovers and dedicated his entire corporate empire to finding her. He personally ran exhaustive data analytics, scrubbing global databases for any sign of her. He manipulated SEO algorithms, burying hidden, encrypted messages in top-ranking search results, hoping that if Lady Lin was out there, she would recognize his digital signature. But there was nothing. The packet loss had been absolute. Wei stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, swirling a glass of sparkling water. He looked exhausted. For a man who had conquered both the modern financial world and the ancient heavenly court, he had never felt so entirely bankrupt. The intercom on his desk buzzed. "Mr. Zhao," his secretary's voice crackled through the speaker. "I apologize for the interruption, but the candidate for the new social media manager and SEO director position is here. I told her you weren't taking interviews, but she was highly persuasive. She said she specializes in optimizing missing data." Wei frowned. He hadn't authorized any interviews. "Security," he began, but the heavy glass doors to his office smoothly swung open before he could finish the sentence. A woman stepped into the room. She was dressed in a razor-sharp, perfectly tailored cream-colored pantsuit. Her dark hair was pinned back elegantly, and her obsidian eyes locked onto Wei with the precision of a striking viper. Wei dropped his glass. It shattered against the marble floor. Lin did not flinch. She walked confidently across the room, stopping just inches from his desk. She reached into her designer pocket and pulled out a small, pastel pink USB drive adorned with a tiny sage green ribbon. She tossed it onto his mahogany desk with a sharp clatter. "I believe you uploaded my mother to your cloud server," Lin said, her voice like silk over steel. "I am here to collect her, and to discuss the terms of our finalized contract." Wei couldn't breathe. He reached across the desk, completely ignoring the flash drive, and grabbed her hand. It was solid. She was real. "You found me," he whispered, a desperate, disarmed smile breaking across his face. Lin smiled back, that dangerous, breathtaking smirk he had fallen in love with. "I did," she whispered, leaning in close. But instead of kissing him, her free hand moved in a blur. Wei froze as the cold, sharp tip of a silver stainless steel letter opener pressed directly against his jugular. Lin's smile widened. "Now, Mr. Zhao, my mother expects 11 grandchildren, and I expect a 51% share of this company. Are we going to do this the easy way? Or do I need to authorize a hostile takeover?" That's where this love story ends for now. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more romantic twists. Tell me in the comments what will you have done. Until the next story, keep craving romance.